Well, if anyone on either side of the George Zimmerman murder trial was hoping to see emotion out of the accused, they have been sorely disappointed. For 3 weeks, he has been a courtroom stoic, stone-faced, even as his friends took the stand to support him, and equally unflinching today as the prosecution began closing arguments by labeling him a lying murderer. But the verdict is certain to bring plenty of emotion out of Sanford, if not from Zimmerman, then from the loved ones of Trayvon Martin and all those court watchers who see this as a test case of America's racial divide. Here's ABC's Matt Gutman with the very latest on the George Zimmerman trial.
After 22 heated days in this Florida court, closing arguments in the murder trial of George Zimmerman finally got underway this afternoon. With the nation and victim Trayvon Martin's parents watching, lead prosecutor Bernie Della Rianda wasted no time invoking the victim.
A teenager is dead. He is dead through no fault of his own.